Well, hello, everyone. I am delighted to be joined by not one, but two guests on this week's show. And long-term listeners will recognize both names as friends of the show and regular participants in really meaningful conversations on various different topics. And firstly, introducing Tom McCullough and also Jim Grubman, who, again, has been on the show a couple of times. For the benefit of our audience, could we frame what it is we're going to be talking about in terms of what integration is, what it looks like, and how perhaps it's different from collaboration, as an example?
I'm going to let Jim start with that one, because that's the hardest question.
Oh, yeah. Tom's good at that. He punts. You got to watch him punt all the time. Well, it's funny because I do have a bit of an advantage in that because of coming out of healthcare, where these are the same questions that have been asked for decades. And maybe a way to frame it is the idea of what does it mean to work together on behalf of the client and the client family? There are, we all work in various aspects of the field related to managing families of wealth, but you can have what we call siloed providers who are just doing their thing, a trust and estates attorney, financial advisor, somebody who works with a family on governance, very individually. But what we're talking about in integration is, first of all, working from the foundation of collaborating, having professionals being able to play well with others and to work together on behalf of the client to collaborate. But collaboration alone, as we have been actually spending a lot of time in the Institute thinking and talking about, collaboration alone is not integration. Integration is a higher level, and it weaves together the many voices and services of the collaborators and raises it up to put it together into kind of an integrated whole, to put it together as a holistic, comprehensive process on behalf of the client. And I'll let Tom expand on that, because in some ways, what we share a perspective on is, number one, for a lot of clients or families, they have to do the integration. They're the quarterback, and they work with a lot of different people who are collaborating, but the client has to integrate it. The best way in the industry that firms are able to do the work is when they work with the client to bring it together with accountability and to integrate all the collaboration so it weaves together smoothly. Tom, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. And I thought maybe I would just use a personal example. Before I started Northwood Family Office with my partner, Scott Heyman, I spent 20 years in the investment industry. And the genesis of Northwood was a personal one for me, because I was looking for what I would really call integration. I had, an investment person, I had a lawyer, my, parents, and we had an accountant. But my father said to me, we should, have some kind of game plan, and we should prepare for wealth transition, before I die versus after. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. So he turned to me, somebody who's from the investment industry, and thought maybe I could do that. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was managing 1,000 people and running a business. And so what I did is I went to our accountant and my dad's accountant and said that exact thing. We want to sort out our affairs. And he, like most professionals, jumped immediately to a solution. So well, you could do an estate freeze, and here's the details, and here's the name of the lawyer downstairs, there's his card, or you can do insurance, and that will solve your issue. And that conversation was probably 5 minutes long. Just imagine all of the things he could have asked me. He could have said, my favorite question is, or tell me more.
Yeah.
How can I help? What were you thinking? How did this come about? But no, he jumped right to a solution, and he's a great guy. There's no issue. It was just, he's one of those solo siloed providers that Jim talked about. And what I was really looking for, I didn't even know what I was looking for, actually. What I was looking for is somebody, somebody who could help me and our family sort through the issues related to our family wealth, ostensibly. So wealth was the catalyst for this discussion of integration. But as we'll see in the conversation as it ensues, is that there's much more than just the financial wealth involved. There's, family relationships and how we have conversations. And so anyway, I don't know. So to me, it was very, very personal. So when I couldn't find it. I couldn't find this integrated solution I was looking for. So that was the catalyst for me to say, well, maybe I should just go do this. They say the best entrepreneurs are frustrated consumers. That's what I was. I couldn't find it. Even at the firm I was at, it was a good firm, but it was a narrow firm. So it was, so really it's been my life's quest in some ways to bring this idea of integration, a person who doesn't just know about one thing, but knows about enough things and can work with others to bring it together for families. And it's quite frankly, it's like one of my friends calls it, it's like nailing a cream pie to the wall. It's very difficult to explain this thing. It's very, kind of mushy, and people say, oh, I do that. People say that all the time, but really, what is it? And it is this idea, as Jim says, of, coming together with either skills internally or with collaborating with others and bringing all the pieces together for the family so they don't have to do it themselves. And it's, I'm a bit of a word nerd, and the idea of integration comes from the word integer, which means whole. Mm-hmm. It's one piece, and that's really our job, is to make it holistic for the family. And, it's hard to do, and there's very few people that do it well. And, but we've been trying to talk about this as the Ultra High Net Worth Institute together, because we think it's not that something everybody should be, but it's a need that families have, and they need to either provide it themselves, because decisions are connected to each other. Every decision you make has knock-on effects to other things. So that's why either they or somebody else on their behalf has to think about how all these pieces connect. Yeah,
you mentioned there that there are a number of firms out there who will say, this is what I do. And you wrote a very good article, which we will link up in the show notes, that kind of highlights the different types of integration, the different levels of integration that perhaps exist out in the marketplace at the moment. And I think it might be worth spending a bit of time focusing on what they are, so that if there are people listening to this who are either experiencing the services from financial professionals or from their professional advisory teams, or if they work within those organizations, they can perhaps recognize where they are on the four levels. So you mentioned they're siloed, which is kind of the starting point. Do you want to expand a little bit more, Jim, on the siloed side and what the other sort of levels of the levels of integration are?
Sure. And in a certain way, the levels are kind of like 0, 1, 2, and 3. Because the first level, the most foundational level, is actually a level of no integration. The siloed provider, you go to see the accountant for some things, and if you need insurance, he hands you a card, says, well, here's a really good guy or woman, and go do that. And so basically it's a level of no integration, which, as Tom accurately mentioned, and as I said before, in a way, what it means is the client does the integration. The default is you are left to do integration on your own as a client from among the solutions that different people offer you. And, a common metaphor that is used is sort of like good integration is like having a general contractor in doing a renovation or building a house or something. And, some people have tried to save money and don't have a general contractor. And so it's like, okay, so here's the flooring people, and then here's the cabinets for the kitchen, and you have to do all the scheduling together, and you have to figure it out. And then, as Tom mentioned, you run into something where it's like, they try and put a new wall up or something, and somebody says, "Oh, actually, you can't do that because that's a bearing wall, and so you're going to have to stop that and go get a guy to do blah blah blah." And it's like, well, I wish I had known that in the beginning. I could have headed off an expensive and difficult problem if somebody coordinated and knew the whole project. So siloed providers of doing individual problem solving is sort of the zero or foundational level. And then up from there is the basic level of integrated financial management. And I'm going to hand that one back off to Tom because he knows a bit more about that. But that's very limited and focused collaboration among some professionals for some things on a basic level.
Yeah, I think for most folks, that would be, if you are, for example, an investment person, you might also have a little bit of knowledge about, forecasting cash flows for families, or you might do some retirement planning, or you might know enough about tax to get by. So, I mean, quite frankly, it sounds like those are optional. I can't even imagine that those are optional. I just can't even imagine how you do investing without knowing those things. But anyway, it's that's the part where you literally take one piece of the financial side and you expand it a little bit more with other financial issues. And quite frankly, I should say that we're not saying that these are one area is better than another. We're not saying that every siloed advisor should try to become an integrated advisor. Not at all. It's more knowing what you are good at, what you want to do, what you like to do, and then either you or the client has to compensate for the missing pieces. So, but I think my experience is every bit of integration that somebody can bring to a family issue is positive. So this is the first step, which is financial integration. And I can turn it back to Jim for the next couple of steps.
The next step up, two steps up from the bottom, is integrated wealth management. And I think Tom would probably agree with me on this. This is where so much of the attention is in the industry now, and this is where they toss around terms and families will hear, "Oh, we do integrated wealth management," and that is seen as integration. We identify a top level above that, but let's talk about integrated wealth management. This is where typically the last 20 years of the industry has moved forward, where people are starting to have under one roof investment and financial management, tax planning, trust and estate planning, maybe philanthropic planning, insurance, risk management, where you get a level of beginning to pull together the very common and perhaps core technical areas around wealth management to do a kind of one-stop shopping. And there are a lot of advantages to that. This also, as I say, is kind of what the industry often looks at as integration. The problem is that when we at the Institute have looked at the full range of the needs of the family, and the model that we talk about is the 10 domains of family wealth, and you, Russ, know quite a bit about it, and it's been on the podcast. There are 10 domains, not 3 or 4.
Only one of which is financial.
And only one of which is financial, exactly. Yeah. And so the idea of firms have gotten better at, and for many firms actually are doing a very good job at weaving together estate planning for wealth transfer, asset management, portfolio management, tax planning, risk management, and very often they pull in philanthropy as part of that. But what we are concerned about is at that level, you're still missing almost half of the needs of the family, which are things like governance and the family dynamics, issues about leadership and decision making in the family, really emphasizing taking care of the rising generation with financial education, health and wellness. We've seen that with COVID in the last couple of years in particular. You see health and wellness and well-being issues come up when an elder starts to develop problems with mental capacity. My God, you get all the domains involved where a family is put into disruption when somebody is struggling like that. So the top level of integration, starting from zero siloed providers, level 1, just integrated financial management, level 2, integrated wealth management. We are now really identifying that the top level is family wealth integration, and that it is the most difficult level. Only a few places are doing it. And we can talk a little more about sort of what goes into that, including, its challenges.
Yeah, I think a couple of points there in terms of highlighting that, we're not saying today that anyone that works in that siloed manner is perhaps doing a huge disservice to people. It's more about what it is that you want to provide, and the family is then making a decision as to what other levels of integration perhaps they would benefit from and make up the gap on. But it does strike me as well, and I've worked in a number of organizations where even though they perhaps say that there is the integrated side of things are siloed often because of the kind of egos that are at play amongst the individuals that keep what we would say the relationship holder, the trusted advisor. And I don't know whether using a reference to Highlander is relevant in terms of there can be only one, but my view with the most trusted advisor is you can't have, say, 10 most trusted advisors because there can be only one, right? So it is part of embracing the integration side of things, dropping the ego and understanding that actually what's most important is that there's a client family on the other side of this that need to have their advisors working together in a way that is far more integrated than perhaps they're benefiting from now.
I think that's true. I think trusted advisor is sort of a funny term. I think there can be many trusted advisors. I think that the key in integration is that there has to be a leader. So somebody has to play some kind of leadership role. I don't think it works very well when there is a group of collaborators with no leader. I don't think that works well unless the family's very good at that themselves and they play that role. I think your point's an excellent one, Russ. It's not a comment on the providers. It is that there is an existential need in the family for integration. Things need to be integrated because one decision affects the other. The question is, who's going to do that? And is it them, or is it, in odd cases, maybe a committee of people, of collaborators? But usually I think that the main role that an important person plays is this integrator. And Jim used the example of a general contractor. I think it's a great example. We're coincidentally in the middle of a building project right now. So I am seeing this absolutely firsthand, and the role of a contractor. And I could, I suppose, manage the timing of when insulation goes in and when pipes go in before concrete, and timing of drywall, and does the electrician come before the plumber? And I could do that, I suppose, but I'm not very knowledgeable about it. And I think most families are not that knowledgeable about all the pieces that go into the management of wealth. And it's funny, you think about integrated wealth management, and maybe people or whatever. Sorry, we mix up the terms too ourselves. It's
family wealth integration, right?
Family wealth integration. But think about a family worth $100 million, just to pick a number, and they own a business, and their business makes widgets, and there's a CEO of that business who runs that business. Might be a family member, might be somebody from outside, and sitting around the table, are all the people that help run that business, head of sales and marketing and manufacturing and administration, legal, and they meet together on a regular basis to plan strategy and to execute. So that family sells their business. So what's the family worth? Still $100 million, but it's now not Widget Co., it's cash. So how will they manage that? First of all, who is the CEO of that business? The same guy or gal that ran Widget Co. for 25 years? They know a lot about widgets, but maybe not a lot about all the things that would be new to them in money. And who sits around the table? Manufacturing, sales, legal? No, they stay with the business. What you need maybe is somebody who knows something about investing or about trusts or about family dynamics and relationships. And do those people ever meet like the management team did? Often they never meet. The family deals with them individually. And so I think your point about egos and how advisors connect, that's certainly one of the pieces. And that's one of as we talk about the difficulties of this, that's certainly one of them. But the other often, I think, is the lack of a leader. And, a family office often plays that role, but it could be somebody else. It could be some other integrated advisor, or it could be somebody in the family that has skills. And they say, why don't you take this on? But somebody needs to play that general contractor role. I'm mixing all my metaphors here, but CEO or general contractor, there's a job. It's one person. They're not an expert in everything, but they're an expert in the things that in integration and bringing all these pieces together to produce a final product, which, really for a family is a great life and meeting all their goals.
Yeah. But it's funny, Tom, because if I may add to that, you actually are referring to something that we talk a lot about in the evolution of what's happened, not just on the advisory side in the last 10, 20 years, but on the family side, which is, Russ, to your point, it was actually a step forward in the industry to identify, quote unquote, the trusted advisor. And when we think back on the books, Todd Fithian and Scott Fithian and Scott Budge wrote about the trusted advisor, and other people, that the idea of really understanding, there's a lot of personal characteristics to become the confidant of the family and to become the trusted advisor. And everybody has now rushed to they want to play that role because, as they say in the industry, you get more and more share of the wallet and you get to hear things first. And it's a very advantageous position to be in. Well, we are now seeing a movement away from an emphasis on the trusted advisor to the trusted team. That the idea of, for the ultra high net worth families that we see, it's too much even just for one person to quarterback and to manage. And so actually the egos can come up with everybody around the table fighting over being, no, I'm the trusted advisor. No, I'm the trusted advisor. And that when people put aside jockeying for position to be the trusted advisor, and you become part of a trusted team on the advisory side, then you really begin to see that accountability and leadership on the advisory side. But what Tom was making reference to was the idea is this also calls on skills on the family side. It takes a mature family that works together with good shared decision making. There may be a family leader, there may be a family council or governance going on the family side, but the best situations of integration actually are with a family that understands and knows how to collaborate with their advisors. Not all families can do that.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
And the point you made about the advisory team becoming a trusted team, I think as well, layering on top of that around them being trusting as well in terms of the role that other advisors can play in that relationship. Because again, sometimes I've seen it previously in the organizations I've worked with, shall we say, where there's the lack of trust of no one else can do this other than me, because no one's going to look after this family or this client as well as I am. And part of of creating this, that the integration around here is trusting that there are people out there who can do it. And again, is that perhaps one of the difficulties is finding the right people to share the mindset of
absolutely
how integration can work.
And this goes to something that we've talked about, which is, what are the characteristics of good advisors around collaboration and integration? And it's not just, putting your ego aside. There are actual, in a sense, group skills that some advisors have and some advisors don't. Not just, for example, let's say you have a multifamily office like Tom's MFO, who is open and collaborative and whatever. When MFOs like that deal with outside providers, and you've probably encountered, Tom, there are some people who are equally collaborative, trusting, don't fight over things. And so there's focus on the client. But also, sometimes an advisory team encounters providers on the outside, where, that person comes in and they have sharp elbows and they want to take over a piece of it, and they want to get this business for the future, and they see this client opportunity as a way to get involved, and they don't collaborate very well because of mistrust or their own personal issues. So finding those advisors who really can put their needs second for the benefit of the client, and ironically, in doing so, gain more business and are well known with advisory teams as somebody that you can work easily with, and it's not a rough process.
I really agree with that. In my own experience, we have been very fortunate to work with a lot of people who are great collaborators. You were talking, Russ, about, is it hard to find people? I think where the gap is, and maybe this is, this is a personal point of view, but the gap, I think, is in that leadership role, because the role of a leader is extremely different. You have to, actually, I'm going to quote from a great article from the Journal of Wealth Management back in the olden days, 2005. And it's called The Integration in Integrated Wealth Management. How does it work in practice? It's just a great piece. Almost impossible.
Tom, by the way, that's like 17 years ago.
I know. But this guy...
It's unbelievable.
These guys were very prescient in their thought process. But what they're talking about is Miles Paget and Louisa Wright Sellers are the authors. But they're talking about, what are the characteristics of a successful integrated advisor? And, it's things like a drive to solve problems, natural curiosity, a broad range of interests, listening and empathy skills, a strong sense of self. So you can say to the client, no, I don't think that's right. On top of that, though, they probably also have to have organization skills and detail oriented and, ability to meet deadlines and ability to work with others and make progress, ability to lead. They have to know something about tax, something about investments, something about humanity, something about empathy, something about governance. Like there's not very many people who have those skills. And I don't mean you have to be an expert in anything, in everything rather. The general contractor who's leading our project, knows less about electrical than the electrician does. But he or she has to know enough and have these leadership and management skills to move things forward. And I think that is one of the reasons why we don't have much integrated management, because there are not many people who have those skills. It's hard to get them. It's hard to get the experience. People tend to gravitate to a particular silo that they're interested in, whether it's investments or family dynamics. And this role of this true integrated advisory leader has not been around very long. I think it will come, like most professions, but it's been slow to come. And I think it's, so I think that's, and then what happens is we have all these people say, oh, I'm an integrated wealth manager. And to Jim's point, those of us who have been in this field for a very long time, have that jaundiced view that perhaps that's not what we're talking about. And maybe I'll just use another little analogy that we've been talking about in the Institute is this idea of bricks and mortar, and not in the context of, a store versus the internet, but rather the difference between a brick and mortar. And a brick in our world, I think, is things like, the tax plan, the investment portfolio, the will. These are bricks that are part of the building of the home of the family, the proverbial home. But what's often missing is the mortar, and the mortar is all those pieces, that connect the dots. It's the ability to connect one brick to another. But what does it take? And some of that is, what these guys put in their article. It's skills, but it's also the ability, what a commercial transaction involves. You've had experience reading 300 wills, so what comes out of those things. So it's not the expertise of that makes the brick possible, but it's how do you connect all those dots?
It's the glue that keeps it together.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that really is my answer to your question of why is this, is it difficult to find people to fit into the team? And it's both sides. It's the collaboration side, but it's also the leadership and skills side.
But it's funny because I think we need to then start talking about a real challenge, which is finding people who can do this. That one of the issues in the industry, and we're looking actively at now, is, there's a lot of people who know a lot about every brick. There's not so many people who can tie it all together, who are good managers. And in many ways, what Tom was talking about was the idea of emotional intelligence and perspective and maturity and calmness, the personal characteristics, and, how to listen rather than talk with a family, how to ask open-ended questions. These really important skills. And so now, actually, one of the things that the industry is running into is moving in a direction of seeing the value of these activities and skills, but discovering that a lot of advisors don't fit the mold of where the industry is going. And so, finding during the talent management and hiring process, headhunting, recruiting, compensating, retaining, providing continuing education, keeping people happy so that they don't go elsewhere. It's a very competitive field. And one of the issues that we're running into is where are the training programs and where are these people coming from and how are they coming up through the pipeline? But those advisors who are able to, as I said, play well with others and how to understand the cohesion that's involved, big picture, they are becoming incredibly valuable, and therefore, they can go anywhere.
Yeah, I just want to say I'm doing my bit, Jim. I've been teaching a course at the University of Toronto for 13 years called The Management of Family Wealth, which really is teaching about this integrated advisor. Yes. Having said that, most MBA students want to be investment bankers and strategy consultants. So it's the odd one that even wants to be in the family wealth field. But it's, but at least, and there's more of that happening, out there. I think that's going to be very positive, but it's still a teeny tiny number. And I think brick makers often, because it's understood what a brick is, often get paid more than mortar makers because it's not a thing yet. It hasn't been, Jim says it's being recognized. It's beginning to be recognized, but it's just a different job, and I think that's what part of the role of the Institute is, to help families realize what it is that they need, where to find it, how to train more people in areas that are going to be helpful to families.
Yeah, and I think that is a very relevant point as well in helping families understand what is available. If we go back to the example you used of the family that sold their business and had $100 million as a result, Jim, you and I spoke about the homunculus of wealth in one of our previous episodes, where the focus tends to be on the money because it's tangible. It's something that's there and needs dealing with. I guess the same can be said from a family's perspective, is if there is financial wealth to manage, the natural inclination is to go to somebody who can manage that wealth. And I guess it's then relying on the fact that whoever they go to is aware that there is far more to this than just the transactional nature of managing the funds. And Tom, to your point earlier on in the show, where you said that you turned up to the accountant's office and said, we need a plan, and within 5 minutes there was a solution on the table. It's a two-way relationship in terms of families going, this is what we're looking for. We've told this is out there. And advisors and institutions going, we recognize that this is something that has huge benefits to families too, right? It's a two-way street.
It's true. And I think the dilemma for institutions is that it's expensive to offer. If you can get somebody to buy into your off-the-shelf product that you already have, and do it without, the messiness of actually having a conversation with the person, it's probably a way more higher margin business. But, an integrated advisor role where you take, 3 hours of client discovery, and talk about all sorts of things, asking people questions about the important issues in their lives. And, that's a much slower, clunkier, you might argue less profitable business because it's, lower margin. There's more time spent. Ultimately, number one, I'm 100% certain it's better for clients. And number two is I think it's probably as high margin over the long term because, people like that tend to keep their clients forever. And I think, if I can use a Canadian example, it's, Wayne Gretzky, famous hockey player, skates to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. Uh-huh. And I think that, we started our firm 19 years ago with that vision in mind. And I think it is happening. I think people are, the fact that we're doing a conversation on integrated management, and a lot of people, when our article was posted, were very interested in the topic. I think it's coming,
Yes.
It's like anything. It takes time and, let's be on the encouraging side of it, but it's, it's heading in, inching in a positive direction.
It's funny because here we can go back and take a page from healthcare again. This was a real issue in the 80s and 90s in healthcare because people were saying, why do it? It costs more. It's difficult. You got to pick up the phone, talk to people, not just do your job. And one of the things that was persuasive and convincing and actually began to be shown through research was a term that is called medical cost offset, where they discovered that there is tremendous inefficiencies in siloed healthcare, repetition of things, repeating tests, people not knowing something had already been done, asking the same questions again and again, the lack of integration and not being able to move an issue forward. And they discovered that actually when integrated care was delivered, medical costs went down in ways that they did not expect. So investing the time to have a variety of people in a team, a multidisciplinary team, which again does have its costs. It's not easy, various things. When you, as a system, devote resources to doing that, what you see is an offset in the inefficiencies and the benefits that occur where things simply go much better. And that was unanticipated, and it's been a big driver of, the Mayo Clinic, seeing that change and other sort of places. And I think that for financial services and wealth management now, that's some of what we need, that we need to really identify what are the costs of a lack of integrated care? What are some of the not just the stories, but, the fact that actually clients wind up paying more because of the lack of integration. And I think we need to be able to make a persuasive case to demonstrate the value of good integration for families that understand it and families that have experienced it. You don't need to persuade them. But for a lot of families, they need to hear, it's like, well, what is the real advantage for it? And I think we need to be developing a really stronger case for that.
Jim, just picking up on your example of healthcare, years ago, when thinking about integration, I came across the West German Headache Clinic. Yeah. And, if you had migraines, what would you do? You'd go to your GP and you'd ask what to do. And he might suggest, a couple of things. And he might say it's
some medications and some
medication. Yeah. And then you might say, well, nothing's happening there. I'll go to a chiropractor and maybe you get some kind of adjustment. And then somebody says, really, it's exercise. And so you might hire a trainer. And so you end up stabbing at things. And I find people stab all the time. People come to us and the first thing they want to know is, what investment managers, would I have? And it's like, I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know anything about you. I can't even answer that. I can't even come close to answering that question. But that's what they're trained to ask. You can't blame the poor client because that's what the industry and the media and have trained them for years. But as you say, when there's a lot of wealth, the first problem they have is, what am I going to do with this money? So it's completely understandable. But imagine, instead of stabbing, if you've been suffering migraines for years and you go to the West German Headache, or the German Headache Clinic in Essen, Germany, and you go in there, what's the intake process like at a place that knows all about what? Headaches, which is your problem. So they probably have all those people on staff.
Very comprehensive, right?
But the intake process and the questions they ask you are not going to be, try this, try that. They're going to be asking you all sorts of things to narrow down what the issues may be of the many, many things that there could be. And what's your goal? And how do you want to, you want them to go away? Of course you do. But what have you tried in the past? I mean, all sorts of things. And so, I think Jim's absolutely right. There's many other domains in the world or areas of practice that we can learn from. And I think healthcare is a good one. Not that it's perfect and there's lots of growth to happen there, but they certainly have some models that we have used at the Institute to look at primarily through Jim's experience that have been really helpful for us.
Fantastic. And if somebody's listening to this show and it's resonating in terms of how they want their organization to operate, or if it's a family looking to find somebody where this level of integration is at play, would a valuable starting point be the 10 domains of family wealth that we touched upon earlier, and Jim and I have recorded a separate show on, as a starting point, using that as almost, here's where we're strong and here's perhaps where we've got some gaps, and then reaching out to others in that area? Is it a good way to kind of embrace
Absolutely.
That evolution from where they are?
Well, it's funny, Russ, you ask make a really great point there, because one of the things when we developed the 10 domains model, and you and I talked about this when we did the podcast, was it was the first model that was completely agnostic of the service side. There was nothing around, I can provide that service, so we're going to include that. Or I don't do that, so we're actually going to ignore that. That this was the first look at the family's needs, independent of who's providing what. And so, to your point, families can take the 10 domains and address an issue with their advisors that is a serious issue, which is being honest. That when a firm says, oh, we do it all, we're integrated, we like that, and the family says, okay, and they systematically start going around the 10 domains and say, so what are your services? And they say, we have somebody in the firm who does that. We can get them involved for you. And
or we can refer you to somebody.
We can refer you. We have a menu of people that we do that. And it's sort of like, and here, we'll give you a card and you talk to them and see what you can do with that. And so, one of the values of the 10 domains is not just to help families understand in a very comprehensive way what their needs are, what they need to be looking for. It's also a great, cheat sheet to work from when they sit down with some advisors who say, oh, we do integrated, wealth management. It's okay. Well, let's look at what, tell us what you really do. And, this is what families asked for in the very beginning that the Institute was founded from, which is they need some help in cutting through the confusion and the lack of transparency and sometimes the dishonesty in the industry to be able to really understand what they're getting and to ask good questions about it. So the 10 domains are a good guide for families to start with.
Maybe mention a sort of a related tool. So I have been working on another book. It's part of the Wealth of Wisdom series. Some of your listeners may know of that. And this one is called Wealth of Wisdom: Top Practices for Wealthy Families and Their Advisors. So the first book really was about the top 50 questions wealthy families ask. And this one is about what are practices that people can use. And the way the book is structured is we don't write all the answers to the questions ourselves or all the top practices. We go to the experts in the world on a particular topic, like Jim Grubman, who's been a significant contributor to both of the books, and ask, bring many voices in, and it becomes literally a wealth of wisdom. The reason I mention that is because one of the chapters in the upcoming book, which will be out in the summer of 2022, is a sort of like a self-assessment that a family can do. It's something we've used in our firm for years. And the reason I like it is because it's not technical. It's not, what is the performance of XYZ? What is the, experience of this particular estate planner? It's questions about how they feel about, how satisfied they feel with things in their life. So for example, I know what my family's long-term goals are. Yes? No? Not sure. We've quantified those goals and we have a good idea what they'll cost. Yes? No? Not sure. I know what rate of return we need from our investments to ensure we meet our family's objectives over the long term. Yes? No? Not sure. All sorts of questions on tax planning, estates, family issues. Our family has frequent, open, healthy dialogue about money and financial issues. Yes? No? Not sure. And what is happening there as the person goes through each of those questions and answers them is they're self-assessing and saying, yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe it's good, but I'm not sure. Or, you know what? We're terrible at that. Or on the other hand, in some cases, we've got that in hand. We just went through a good review or it's fantastic.
Or we haven't even thought about it. Exactly. And so the point of this or the 10 domains is really, it's to help families reflect on where they think the needs are. Now, it is true that they will think in bricks as opposed to mortar because we've taught them to think that way for a long time. Is your will finished? What is your rate of return? Those are bricks. And so what this kind of self-assessment does is gives them the chance to reflect on how they feel about each of these components of their life. And then our suggestion is that they, not just one family member does it, but maybe other family members. So maybe dad feels like this is all in hand and mom goes, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Maybe the kids say, I'm not sure. Or if it's done, I don't know about it. So whatever the tool is that you want to use, I think it's very, very helpful to have this type of self-reflection and self-assessment, because then you can go and say, I think some people might say, what's come out of this for me is we need somebody strong in this particular area. We've got no confidence here, but in lots of areas we do. Or people might look at it and say, out of 50 questions, I've got 40 no or not sure. I need somebody to help me navigate this. So you go to a different kind of person, an integrated advisor. So, I think those are the types of tools that we're trying to figure out, as an institute, and as practitioners in the industry. How do we help families get to where they should get to where their need can be met?
Yeah, and I think a couple of, both examples used there around the 10 domains and the tool that you're talking about there, Tom, is that they're focused on positive outcomes for the family, for the client that is, the end user, if you like, of the services that are being provided. And one of the common challenges, my background has been in financial planning and wealth management. One of the common challenges was to change a business model, to shift away from, say, level 1 or 0 of integration to something else is costly, time consuming. There's perhaps not the economic motivation in terms of the time frame.
Not easy.
But it's difficult or impossible until it's done, right? And you have examples where there are ways to do it and there are tangible benefits for everybody within that process. And Jim mentioned about the unintended consequences of the medical integration was actually healthcare costs came down. There are examples of full integrated management that people can use as an example for this, rather than thinking we've got to be the pioneers here, right?
Yes, I think the family wealth integration level, the top level, there are places around it. Again, I think Tom at Northwood does it. I know several other multifamily offices, single family offices, some of the top leaders in the industry not only are doing this, but they're constantly striving. I know, for example, a multifamily office in the Midwest in the U.S., and they've spent the last 10 years in some of the ways that we've talked about. First of all, changing their hiring practices, looking for during the hiring process, people who can work as a team, people who have emotional intelligence, people who are really good at their jobs, and crafting a team that can work together. They have worked on building a team structure so that people work consistently. One of the things we haven't talked about and may not have time today is the back end, the back office stuff around wealth technology and having integrated solutions so that you can work with a client in a way to show them the entire portfolio in a seamless manner. That really helps when you're sitting and talking with that. It takes a lot of work. It's expensive. Sometimes you have to invest in the firm, and you have to not only, get it up and running, you have to keep it going, maintaining state-of-the-art sort of processes. And both Tom and I know people in the industry who are doing this, but, as Tom said in the beginning, it's not for everyone. Not everybody can devote the resources, and it takes great leadership. That's one of the things that I have found. You have to have the vision at the top to do this. You have to have somebody who really understands it. And both Tom and I know people in the industry, but it's not common, And so this is where perhaps in some ways the industry is going, where that puck is going. But at the same time, it ain't easy. And to be able to have the vision, the structure, the team functioning, a lot of pieces have to come together, and it takes a lot of work.
It's like that, creative destruction concept where it's very difficult for a large successful firm to spin out something new and groundbreaking. That's why you get these startups that do these things, and then the big companies buy them. So it's very difficult for, just as you said, Russ, for a firm or an advisor that's done things one way for a long time to suddenly say, oh, this is a good idea, I should try this. We've talked about all the reasons it's difficult to do, so it's costly. It's a very costly decision. So in some ways, and it's funny, I remember when we started our family office in 2003, we immediately went to others who had already done this to learn from them. And it's so funny. Many times they said, oh my gosh, we envy you. And we were thinking, oh my gosh, how could you envy us? We're just starting. And they said, well, you have a clean sheet of paper. and you can do what you think is the right thing to do. We have all this history that we have to, we have baggage, and many positive things as well. But there's something about a clean sheet of paper that we had the luxury of starting from what we thought was the right thing to do and built a business around that. And it's very difficult. You're absolutely right, for larger organizations, particularly, or people who've done it for a long time, to make a shift. It depends on age and stage too. The older you get, the harder it is to change.
Yeah. And I guess, it might be a bit twee to say, but progression over perfection in that sense, in terms of if you're looking to move into the different levels of integration to the sort of level 4, if you like, it is, do you wait until you have the absolute perfect solution in place in its entirety before you sort of flick the switch and go, it's live? Or do you embrace the messy a little bit and go with the intention rather than letting that be an enemy to progress?
I think that's right. And I also think it's just a good moment to say, when you've got 4 levels or whatever, 0 and 1, 2, 3, you think, there's this Holy Grail at the end and that's the only one that's good. The rest are all less than good. And we're not saying that at all. We're saying that, we think that's sort of the full benefit a family can receive. But I think if somebody is, starting from being a siloed advisor and at least begins the process of being aware of the other issues that families are facing and possibly integrating some of those into what they offer, so long as they have the skills for it. I think that's really the caveat. I think it's all good. All of that is good. Anything that connects the dots for people, for families, is positive. It reminds me of somebody was talking about, goals-based investing. And to me, it's kind of like, that's like oxygen-based breathing. I mean, how can you not have some level of integration? But listen, I worked in the investment industry, in the 80s, and there was not much integration of anything. It was ideas, investment ideas. And, the industry has changed over time, but I think, so I'm very much with you that I think, anything you can do to integrate and connect the dots for clients is a positive, so long as you're skilled enough to handle it.
And to follow up on that, what Tom just said, in some ways what we're saying is just be honest. Don't say you do full integration when you think you can do tax planning, estate planning, and financial planning together, and that's it. Families are looking for, just be honest with us and tell us what really is going on. And it's
Jim, that's like, I like all kinds of music, country and Western.
Everything. Yes, right. And that's the full gamut. Yes. But, I think, what we're saying is we want firms to just know where their sweet spot is, to be honest about it, to be able to describe it to families, because actually on the family side, a lot of families are perfectly happy with, integrated financial management or maybe some integrated wealth management. They may not really want or see the need for the full family wealth integration, or again, perhaps want to pay for it or go through the process. So, a family that's at a level 2 in integration needs a level 2 firm, and that's a good fit. That's going to be a productive, happy fit. So we're just trying to help the industry understand kind of what the landscape is and help families know how to find what is going to fit them the best for the long run.
And it also doesn't mean, Jim, that a level 4 firm only does level 4 things. There are families who want, level 3 integration, the integration of their wealth and the family stuff.
And that's it.
I mean, again, I don't even know how you can do it without taking the family stuff into account, but it's not, none of these are either or. They all overlap. They'll bleed into one another, which is part of the problem. Part of the issue is it is a little bit confusing. And I think the industry is in the early stages. And that's really why the Ultra High Net Worth Institute was formed, was to help think these things through in a sort of unbiased, collegial kind of way that will be helpful to families at the end of the day.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm conscious of time, but also conscious of the importance of the topic. Is there anything else either of you wanted to cover off on today's show that perhaps we haven't got to yet?
Well, the only thing I'll add is that, like most things, and certainly in a lot of professional areas, we're constantly learning. If we come back on again in a year's time, or 6 months' time even, I'm sure there will be some things that we will have learned and said, we were thinking it was heading this direction, but we've had this aha from 4 people we talked to that, this is a different way to think about it. And that's already happened in the last couple of years, hasn't it, Jim?
Oh, yes.
Even just the idea of these various levels, we sort of, Jim and I were chatting one evening, since we only talk on Zoom about integration, that, it's not like everybody has to become an integrated advisor. If you have these structures, sometimes people think, oh, that's the only way that I can ever do something right or good or be happy. But it's not true. That was something we learned along the way. Yeah. I think that will be very, very true. It's a very iterative process.
Yeah, reaching for something that you really cannot do or don't have the vision for is worse than knowing your sweet spot, knowing what you can do, understanding and fulfilling how you want to deliver services the best way for families. Which actually, I think, to your issue, the point, Russ, which is one of the things we're really actively looking at now. Remember, we were talking about that medical cost offset and the advantages. We're trying to collect examples of good integration. We're collecting it within the Institute. We're going to be doing that with members. And so if people are listening to the podcast, and if you have experienced a situation where you got really good integrated service and it made a difference in the family, please, you can contact Tom or me at the Institute. Steve Prestano heads the Institute. Let us know, because the more that we collect examples, Tom, maybe what we're trying to shoot for here is have integration be more like pornography, where you know it when you see it.
I think that maybe should not be our new tagline.
Yeah, maybe we should not go there with that. Yeah.
I know what you mean. I know your point.
We're going to have to edit that part out there. But in some ways, it's sort of like people know examples of good integrated service when they experience it, and they know maybe it saved them money. That's great. Maybe it just simply made it better for the family. Maybe it's provided a solution that no one else would have thought of unless you had an integrated team. The people who are listening to this, if you've had experience, let us know, because I think you can then contribute to moving this field forward and for the benefit of other families.
Yeah, and I will put links in the show notes that signpost people to how they can get in touch. And I guess if people want to find out more, the best place for that is via the Ultra High Net Worth Institute.
Yes, you can email to the Institute at info@uhnwinstitute.org, or you can email me or Tom, and we'll take it in and we will add it to what we are working on. We really want to hear from families and from firms. Maybe you had a particular difficulty in implementing integration, which was solved in a certain way. This is something we all need to learn from collectively and move things forward.
Fantastic. Tom, Jim, thank you very much for your time and for everything that you're both doing with the Institute and moving the field forward in the way that you are. I'm very appreciative of you coming on the show and telling our audience about it today.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thanks, Russ. Really enjoyed it.